Welcome back to Learn Astrology with Mary. My name's Mary English. You can find me at www.maryenglish.com, maryenglish.co.uk, and UK Astrologer. Hello, how are you? I've had a very strange week since last week. Obviously, we've had Christmas, but I had my last homeopathy client. Sad face. So I've been practicing homeopathy. Obviously, you practice homeopathy before you're qualified because you're supervised practice. Because I qualified in 2001 and we're 2025 now, so it's at least 24 years. But I was in supervised practice for 2 years before that. So let's say 2019. So it's quite a while. And I started learning it a bit before then. Anyway, my private practice as a homeopath has now ceased, and I will not be advising anybody on homeopathy anymore. And if you have any homeopathy queries, then what you need to do is to buy my book, A Little at a Time, Homeopathy for You and Those You Love, which is available on every form of platforms, blah, blah, blah. It's available as an ebook. It's available as a physical paperback, and Amazon sells it. And if you go to Amazon, it says it isn't there. Doesn't matter. Just click and buy it, because then they'll notify my publisher, and a copy will get printed, because it's print on demand, and print on demand books on some platforms don't show up as being in stock because they're not in stock. They're in the cloud and will be created if you order one. Anyway, it is a bestseller. I got some very nice royalties at Christmas. That was cool, but I won't be practicing anymore. So I'm in sort of two minds about it. One part of me is relief, because I'm not now responsible for people's health, and then the other is sort of sadness because I spent so long training to be one, 4 years I think. It was supposed to take 3, and I had to do the second year twice because I changed colleges, and so that part of my life is now over. It's very weird when you're self-employed to give up something that you qualified in, and my reasons for doing it, because I have been asked by people, is because as I get older I'm probably going to get more forgetful, and I don't want to be the person that forgets the client or forgets what they've told them or anything like that, because in homeopathy it's very, very detailed and analysed, and there's a lot of things to remember and consider, and it isn't as if you have a consultation and immediately know what remedy a client's going to have. You don't, because you have to do a thing called repertorising after the patient has left the consultation. You then write up the notes and consider them, and then weigh them up, and then what we call repertorise, which is go through the thing called the repertory, which is a book of symptoms, and try and summarise what remedy it might be that the person needs, and to match it exactly. So all those symptoms the person has expressed, then match it exactly as possible to a remedy that has those symptoms in its profile, in the picture of the remedy. It's very complex, homeopathy, and I'm very pleased with myself. I managed to practice for that amount of time. But anyway, that's my reason for retiring that part of my practice. Now I'm still practicing as an astrologer. Obviously, that is never going to stop. And I'm still practicing as a hypnotherapist, doing past life sessions and all different types of sessions with clients. And again, those are things that I could probably literally do in my sleep. Homeopathy takes a lot more brain power, and as you know, because I've got Mercury retrograde, I have to be aware of what my mental capacity is capable of. Anyway, that's the very long introduction there, so I don't know if you've fallen asleep, but you can wake up now because I'm finished. But I wanted to share it with you because it will show up on my website for just a little bit longer, and then all that will be there will be a page about the book. If you want to buy the book, A Little at a Time, Homeopathy for You and Those You Love, and you can prescribe at home. So it's a list of conditions that you can treat at home, a list of remedies that are suitable for home treatment, the difference between home treatment and professional treatment, etc., 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 and some mention about the homeopathic provings that I did. Provings are when you give a new substance that's never been used homeopathically before to volunteers, and then they record the symptoms that I have when you prescribed it for them. because they didn't have those symptoms prior to taking the remedy, and then what symptoms are produced during the, inverted commas, we call it approving, those are the symptoms that the remedy will cure, because like cures like homeopathy, and that part of homeopathy I absolutely loved doing that. I've done 9 provings, the first of which was Tempesta, which was from a thunderstorm that happened in Bath, and it attracts your soulmate too. So I have done a proving with that. I have done clinical trial, and yes, it brings your soulmate. So if you want any of that, get in contact. Mary@maryenglish.co.uk. I still have some of that in stock, and I can order it, but I'm not taking cases. I'm not prescribing for people anymore now. I would like to, if you're listening and you were a client, I'd like to thank you for placing your trust in me over the years and your health. Thank you for trusting me with your health. So getting on to today's podcast, today I'm going to be covering the chart for the UK and the transits for it. Now, I don't do a lot of what is called mundane astrology. Mundane, I always think it's funny, isn't it? Mundane sounds boring. Mundane astrology is the astrology of politics and countries and groups of people and things that are in the news and happenings. So they're not individual to a person, they are for a place, or an incident. So the date that a volcano explodes, or the date that a plane crashes, or what happens politically, the transits and whatever for that. That's mundane astrology, which I don't do a lot of. But when it comes to the new year, I do look, and I have done in previous episodes, looked at the chart for the UK for the coming year and the transit rhythmogram. So I've covered transit rhythmograms in episodes 178, 227, 377, 412, 419, 431, 440. So I have covered what the transit rhythmogram is, if you don't know, but I might actually do a webinar on it at some point. Anyway, the transit rhythmogram I've created for 2026. Now you can create a transit rhythmogram for any birth data. Okay, so the date that your company starts, the date that you give birth, the date that you adopt your dog, whatever, you can do a transit rhythmogram for that. Astro.com will create it for you. I don't think it works though for children. Let me just double check. So if you've got somebody that's ever so young that's only just appeared, oh yes you can, I've just double checked, you can create a transit rhythmogram for any date. So I just logged into astro.com, today's date and being born at 6 o'clock this morning, and yes, it'll create one. So yeah, you could do a transit rhythmogram for any date. I don't know, I'm thinking that, I don't know if you can create one for a date in the future for something that hasn't happened yet, but yeah, I don't need to go there. Now, so we're going to be talking about the chart for 2026. We're going to be talking about the UK chart. And I had a message, I think it was yesterday actually. I posted on Instagram, this is what I was going to be doing today. And somebody got in contact. They will remain nameless because I haven't asked permission to share their name. And they said, I see that you did the year 1927. And I think they'd Googled, when was the UK created, and they said, it should be 927. And what I said in reply was, I am using the chart for the UK, the latest, so the most recent creation of the country that I live in and what it legally is. So the date that I always use, and that's me, you can use any date you like, okay? You can, when was Hadrian's Wall built or something, or when did the British kill the Scottish or whatever. But I use the date, the 12th of April 1927, which was a Tuesday. That's when the United Kingdom was created politically and called itself the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. So that combines the countries of England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. And that was when it was made a legal entity. And always with anything that is political and has gone through Parliament and everybody's voted on it, always then the date that they do it, it always starts at 0000 hours in the morning of the date that it is created for. So say they had all the discussions and Parliament went, we're going to do this and we're going to make it the 12th of April 1927. Then I double checked with Parliament. It's always the earliest of that day that is the day that the thing then goes and becomes a legal entity. So the UK, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, became a legal thing. It was called something different before then, and blah, 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 blah. But that's when that was created, which is 12th of April 1927, which actually is quite, inverted commas, recent. So we can argue about the fact, maybe England was created when King Henry VIII did this, or we got invaded by blah, blah, blah. But this is my thinking. Why do I choose this date? My thinking on that is that those dates from so far back won't relate to how Parliament and political things operate now. So when we're talking about the countries, because there's more than one country involved, the countries of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and it's shortened down to the United Kingdom because we are united with Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales and England, as much as those particular countries might not want to be part of the UK and they want to be independent. As it stands, as I speak to you today, they are all one entity, and our politics that we have at the moment unites them all. So whether or not it physically actually happens for those people living in those other areas like Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland, whether or not they feel that for themselves, but UK law is for all of those areas. Okay, so that's why I choose that date. When the first time I did it, and I can't remember how many years it was back now, it might be 2, 3, 4, I can't remember, but when I created that chart, I did do a considerable amount of research to find out the correct date and what the time was and what did it represent, etc, etc. So take my word for it, that's the date that I like to use, and I think that relates more to how things are in the UK now. Now obviously if you're medieval astrologer, you're going to use a much earlier date than that, but I'm not a medieval astrologer, I'm just a book standard astrologer. Okay, so I just want to explain that a little bit, and it was a great question, so I'm really glad that they asked me that question, and I could explain to them why the year that they had chosen is I'm not saying it's wrong, that isn't what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I'm using a date that is most recent. So until Parliament decides to call the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, until they decide to call it something different, I will carry on using that date. Okay, so that's a nice big explanation you've got there for today. Now, just to give you some context to the size of the United Kingdom, these are approximate figures, okay? England is approximately 51,000 square miles. Wales is 8,200 square miles. Scotland is 31,000 square miles. Northern Ireland is 5,000, approximately 5,500 square miles, and the UK as a total is approximately 94,000 square miles. So in kilometres, that's the UK is about 244 square kilometres, England is 133, Wales is 21, Scotland is 80, and I can't read my own writing there, Northern Ireland is 14,000. So that's approximate dimensions of the country that I live in. I live in England, okay, but it's part of the United Kingdom. So we're not talking enormous compared to other countries in the world, etc. We're giving you a little bit of geography today. So here's the UK chart. The charts are on the show notes. The show notes are on the podcast link, which is at Libsyn, and the address for it is astromary.libsyn.com. It's always the latest episode that shows up there first. If you want an earlier episode, you're going to have to use the search box at the top. So here's the chart of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and it's the 12th of April 1927 with the Sagittarius ascendant at 6 degrees Saggy, with Saturn slapped right onto the ascendant retrograde 7 degrees into Saggy. So Saturn is on the ascendant in the UK, retrograde 7 degrees, and the ascendant is 6. Now, when I read a mundane chart, I find it very hard to read it and imagine it as a country. So when I'm reading it, I'm more likely to read it like it was a person, because I spend so much of my time looking at data for people. As I said, don't do mundane astrology, and I do a small amount of event astrology, and yeah. So when I'm talking about this chart, I'm going to talk about it a bit like it is a person. If it were a person, how would the transits that are going to smack into it in 2026, how are they going to manifest for that person? Sagittarius ascendant, Saturn on the ascendant, going to take everything very seriously. Sagittarius is an international sign of the zodiac. Saturn is a serious one. I don't think Saturn's particularly happy at all being in Saggy, but there we go, because Jupiter would be. And Jupiter in this chart actually is in Pisces, but I'll come to that in a minute. So the first house only contains one planet, which is Saturn, and because it's retrograde, it wants to be a bit different. So this is, imagine this person, this is a country, collection of countries, don't forget the United Kingdom is more than one country, a collection of countries, a person that wants to be considered as wise. Anybody with a Sagittarius ascendant will knee-jerk towards wisdom. Wisdom is a key word for Saggy. If you are a Saggy, obviously you're the wisest person that's ever been born. If you've got Moon in Sagittarius, you know perfectly well that you're more intelligent than anybody else. And if you've got a Sagittarius ascendant, you're going to love learning, and your knee-jerk thing is going to be about wisdom. So important. And it's take me seriously, but take me seriously slightly differently because it's retrograde. Fourth house is Jupiter. This is the home, the roots. So the home of the UK. We've got Jupiter, Mercury and Uranus. I'll come to Uranus in just a second. Jupiter is 19 degrees, Mercury is 23 degrees. Jupiter's happy in the sign of Pisces. And again, it's an international knowledge learning type of planet. So this would represent a country or a person that as they were growing up in their infancy and their collective home, learning is very important. And actually in the UK, it is. There are all these posh universities and all the rest of it, whether or not you've been to one, and I haven't, trust me on that, I've only ever been to school and a few colleges. It is quite considered a thing in the UK about education, yeah? So you've got to get your university degree and blah, blah, blah. Mercury's there as well. Now, Uranus is located in there, and that is a key planet for next year. Uranus is located in the fourth house at 0 degrees Aries. And as you know, unless you've been asleep for the last few years, Neptune and Saturn are just about to go into the sign of Aries. So they're going to go smack straight into that Uranus. Okay, so 2 outer planets are going to go bump onto Uranus, and then Uranus itself is going to go into the sign of Gemini next year. So I'll talk about the exact dates that happens in a minute, but just keying you up to what is going to happen for the UK, yeah, next year. I mean, don't take my word for it, because I don't do a lot of mundane astrology. I'm just reading this like a birth chart. So just, man, this is Mr. UK that's come to see me, because obviously Mr. UK is male. He's not a girl. We're such a paternalistic flipping country. I'm just going to break off for a minute to tell you something. I was watching a video last night on YouTube, and it was an old BBC video, and I was watching it with sound off, and because I was crocheting and I was trying to count, and in the video, the beginning part of the video is about a group of three ladies that lived together in London in the it was quite sort of early, I think it was the 1960s, that's right. So they were living in a flat in, maybe it was Islington, some part of London, and the way the bloke introduced the concept of this programme, what it's going to be about, talking about that particular part of London, was prostitutes and this and that, and women that were, of disrepute and all the rest of it, and showed this lovely road with all these very attractive terraced houses, or sort of 4 or 5 stories high, and the way the program was going to be about these women that lived together and what they did and how much rent they paid, and it was all about getting married and getting jobs and anyway, don't get me started. Sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned that. The sun of the chart is in the 5th. So the sun is very happy in the 5th, and I would consider the UK as a very, very creative country. I've told you before about my sister, one of my sisters being a poet and the other one being she's a painter and decorator professionally, but she trained in art, so she's an artist. I had a brother who was an antique book dealer, I had a younger sister who did weaving and stuff. There is a lot of creativity in the UK. Think about the films that happen. So the sun in the 5th is very happy there. It's going to operate quite nicely. So I would say, this is just my opinion on this now, okay? So please write in and disagree with me. The sun being in the 5th, the sun is happy. In the UK, creativity isn't discouraged, okay? Maybe there's not enough funding, but we do have an arts council, okay? I know a lot of people that are professional artists that bemoan the fact that they can't make as much money as they'd like to. I'm a member of the Society of Authors. Don't get me started on the amount of authors that complain they can't get publishers and stuff, but it doesn't stop people from doing it. They might moan about doing it because that's a very British thing. But I would say that's very, very representative of the UK. Sun in the 5th. It's happy there. Chiron is there too, and Chiron is, so the sun is 21 degrees Aries, but Chiron is there at 1 degree Taurus. So it's sort of, that's the moaning that you get. So, I can't make a living being a whatever creative type of person. Venus is in Taurus, very happy there. Venus is in Taurus in the 6th. The 6th is about health. So you would say, if you were reading this for the client, oh, well, you don't have any health problems. Venus is happy there. Venus is quite a nice planet to have in the 6th house. And remember that the UK invented the National Health Service. In fact, maybe one day I'll do the date the National Health Service was created compared to the chart for the UK. Now, Uranus, so natal Venus in the sign of Taurus in the 6th, and Uranus is hovering around there at 27 degrees retrograde. So on the 1st of January, so I've done this chart with transits for the 1st of January because obviously that's the beginning of the year. And with Uranus, because Uranus is so important for the next year, trust me, with it hovering over Venus, there has been in the news this last few weeks that the NHS is at a crisis point because of the numbers of people that haven't had flu jabs, or maybe they have had flu jabs, but there's a lot of flu going around, and the hospitals themselves are inundated and suffering, and they're not coping. Lots of notices all over the place, don't go to hospital unless you're really sick, and if you do go, wear a mask because flu can kill people. So with Uranus retrograding, hovering over Venus, maybe that has been why the National Health Service has been so overstretched for so long, and maybe next year, because that obviously will move out of the sign of Taurus where it's been for yonks and on the Venus, so because it probably would have been conjuncted around about the beginning of the pandemic. But anyway, it's going to shift out of the sign of Taurus and go into Gemini, and it'll be away from that Venus and it'll be further through the 6th house. So hopefully, let's see, maybe the NHS does improve next year. Maybe they employ zillions of doctors and nurses and stuff and it all gets back to normal. We shall see. So natally in this chart we've got Mars in the 7th in the sign of Gemini, and the north node's there, 0 degrees Cancer. So if that was a client of mine and I saw Mars in the 7th, I'd say, well, maybe there's a lot of wanting to wear the trousers in the relationship and sort of fighting about things. I haven't checked again the rate of divorce in the UK. I know it's high. It's 1 in every 4 marriages. Is that right? Having said that, let me just triple check. Oh, it's 42%, 1 in 2. Oh, even worse. Maybe I was thinking 1 in 4 was mental health issues. That's why I got that in my head. That's a lot. 40% of marriages end in divorce. Well, that would be your Mars, wouldn't it, in your 7th. North node's there in Cancer. The UK does encourage people to have children. It's not actively discouraged. I mean, it probably is now because the maternity units are getting less and less and maternal care is getting, don't get me started. But the North Node in Cancer in the 7th. And also the UK definitely encourages marriage. Yeah. Lots of people don't, but it encourages marriage. A married woman has more legal rights than common law. There's no such thing as common law. So read my book, The Astrology of Lovers, where I expand on that. But if you live in the UK and you get married and you're a woman, the law will protect you more than if you're just living with someone, especially when it comes to your partner dying and who owns what and where does it go, especially if you die intestate without a will. Nothing is conjuncting that 0 degrees Cancer in the 7th. 8th house, Pluto's there. 8th is sex, birth, death, reincarnation, investments, other people's money and stuff. I suppose the UK laws and inheritance are stacked in favour most of the time of rich. Tell me a country which isn't. Jupiter has been transiting through the 8th house of the UK. Investments. Oof. Think about that whatever you want. Now what's interesting we've got the 9th house in the UK chart has the moon and Neptune in the sign of Leo. Well, we have a king now. Anything to do with Leo is definitely royalty, if you're thinking of countries and stuff. And a high percentage of the previous rulers, is that the right word, or royalty to the UK, the Queen had natally moon in Leo, the present king has a Leo ascendant, and I'm 99% sure he's got moon in Taurus, because his mummy was Taurus, that's right, and he's got sun in Scorpio, but he's got a Leo ascendant, and so incidentally does the ex-Prince Andrew. He's not a prince anymore, he's Andrew something or other, but he's got a Leo ascendant as well. So that Leo moon conjunct Neptune, and they're exact, they're both 24 degrees in the 9th house of long distance travel, further education, philosophy and all the rest of it. And there is this ridiculous thing in the UK, the British Empire. Well, yeah, we ran out to all these other countries in the world, took them over and killed everybody and did horrific things with them, and if that isn't moon in Leo conjunct Neptune, I don't know what it is. The Neptune's retrograde, but there's some sort of, when the moon and Neptune are conjunct, the emotions of the person is very, what's the word? It's ethereal. So the moon, when Neptune is so close to it, the emotions are always going to be, the imagination is going to make them worse. Just look at social media, all you do is post something on there that might be ridiculously controversial and everybody's going to jump down your throat. But equally, the moon and Neptune's a planet that governs films. Going back to what I was saying earlier about the sun being in the 5th, but the Neptune retrograde in Leo can represent creativity, yeah, and films. Richard Harness talks a lot about that Neptune when it was discovered, and he classifies it as being a planet that governs things like film, and because watching a film, it's, unless you're watching a documentary, which isn't the same thing, but if you're watching a film of any description, it isn't a documentary, a film is going to take you to a different world, an imagination in your mind. So even though you're watching it on the screen, you have to use your imagination to step into the concept that is being broadcast to you. Anyway, Moon Neptune conjunct in the 9th. Nothing in the 10th, 11th, 12th, 1st, 2nd, 3rd. It's very much a one-sided chart. There's planets in 6 houses and 6 houses are empty, apart from Saturn in the 1st house. So we've got a bucket chart. So we've got an empty left-hand side apart from Saturn. So it's not, shut up, Mary, it's not completely empty, but there's 1 planet there, and then we've got 9 planets on the other side of the circle. And the angles that it takes, so the right-hand side to the chart represents the whole being with other people thing, whilst the left-hand side of the chart is sort of infancy and whatever. The people divided charts up in lots of different ways. The MC to the chart is 4 degrees Libra. Maybe in the UK we try to be fair. I don't know. Would depend on your political views. Now there are some squares. Moon squares Venus. Moon is conjunct Neptune. The Sun, squares. Sun square Pluto. So the Sun is 21 degrees Aries, and Pluto is in Cancer at 13 degrees. So they definitely form a square. Other squares are Mercury to Mars, Mars to Jupiter, Mars to Uranus, which we're going to talk about it in a minute. So the present transit, so the year starts, obviously every year starts with the Sun being in Capricorn, that's a given. I haven't done the chart for the exact moment that the 1st of January occurs, because it's pretty rare for anything, I could say that there's going to be an explosion or something, it's pretty rare for anything to actually happen at 0000 hours on the 1st of January in the UK, like politically or whatever. You know, people are still, some of them are still on holiday, they haven't gone back to work, etc. Trust me, in the UK the whole country just disappears from the days leading up to Christmas to the new year. It shuts down. The streets are empty. Sometimes the shops fill up a bit, but we drove out this morning just to go for a dog walk, and we didn't go far. We went about 5 minutes away, and there was no signs of life. And we left at 8 and got back about 9:30, and there were so few people out on a Sunday, sort of a Christmas, post-Christmas Sunday. Everybody's still recovering, I think, alcoholism. Talking of which, if you've got access to my hypnosis tracks, there's one on there if you'd like to cut down your alcohol intake. I've just added it on there for a client. But I don't like, in the UK's chart, the Moon in Leo square to Venus in Taurus. That's not particularly nice. I don't think women have a particularly good time in the UK. There have been lots of protests, and we have had suffragettes, etc. But it is very much still a paternalistic. Don't get me started. So that's the UK. So the transit that'll happen on the 1st of January. So nothing's going to kick in till a bit later. You've got Mercury in Sagittarius, you've got Venus, Sun and Mars in Capricorn, you've got Pluto in Aquarius, North Node Pisces, Saturn and Neptune still in Pisces, and they're conjunct the natal Mercury. Transiting Chiron is retrograde in Aries, conjunct the Sun, so it hasn't returned. It's working towards a return, but it's not there yet. So maybe the creative industries in the UK are under the influence of Chiron as the year starts. And as the year starts, Uranus is retrograding on Venus. The Moon is in Gemini, just about to slip into the 7th at 6 degrees, and the ascendant of the chart is 6 degrees 22. The Moon is just into the 7th, yeah. Jupiter is retrograding in Cancer through the 8th, but the rest of everything is empty. So now let's look at the transit rhythmogram. I'm only going to look at next year. And Uranus is the one I want to tell you about. So Uranus, transiting Uranus, is going to exactly sextile natal Uranus in May 26. Now, interestingly, since Uranus normally does retrogrades when it first goes into a sign, it isn't going to go back and do anything next year. It's just going to slowly chug through the sign of Gemini. Let me just double check that on the ephemeris. Yeah, it does retrograde. I was thinking it's going to retrograde at some point. It retrogrades on the 11th of September and goes back. How long does it retrograde for? Yeah, it goes all the way back and ends the year at 2 degrees. So there's me saying I'm not going to look at 2027. It doesn't form that exact. It only does it the once. Like, we're talking exact. So something in the UK is going to happen in May next year. Now, it's Uranus, you can't make a prediction about, otherwise you're not talking about Uranus. But I'd be interested to see what goes on in the UK in May next year. The natal Uranus is located in the 4th house of home and roots, and then transiting Uranus is going to form an exact sextile to it. Meanwhile, earlier on in the year, and that's in February, I think it was, transiting Saturn is going to exactly conjunct the natal Uranus. And then transiting Neptune is going to conjunct the natal Uranus in February next year. So the natal Uranus of the UK, and are we saying that the natal Uranus in the UK, can that represent AI? Is something going to happen about AI that's totally, out of control? Oof. We shall see. The other major things, the outer planets in the transit rhythmogram for next year are not doing enormous peaks. Pluto's reasonably behaving. It forms a trine to the natal MC, but the ruling planet to the UK chart is Jupiter, and that's one we need to concentrate. So the year starts, we're transiting Jupiter square to the Sun. Yeah, because the natal Sun to the chart is Aries. Then it trines to the natal Jupiter. So I would... Yes, we've got peaks. It's exactly conjunct. Transiting Jupiter is going to exactly conjunct the natal Neptune in Leo in October, November next year. So something's going on because the natal Neptune's in the 9th house of international things, and Jupiter's a reasonably lucky one. And it comes along, conjuncts the natal Moon, but they're a funny combo to start with, and in that conjunction goes on into 27, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with our international relations in October, November next year. Transiting Saturn's going to form a square in June and August next year. But the Saturn thing, that's February, that's conjuncting the natal Uranus. That's the ones I'm keeping in mind, because Uranus is so unpredictable, and what you don't want with Uranus is coming along and making it even more, like giving it extra energy to be even more, unpredictable, and outer transit planets can do that. So there's things happening, and then we go way into the future now, 2028, and the outer planets, they're near enough flatlining. So if you were a client, I'd say, 26, 27 is quite active. We get to 28 onwards and things are going to slow down. But next year, there is stuff going on. Now, if you're working with a client and you're doing this same thing, I personally, when it comes to outer planetary transits, generally stick to an exact conjunction. So when something gets to exactly conjunct, sextiles, trines, squares, oppositions, obviously same thing, are going to do stuff, but they have more of an inverted commas effect when that aspect is exact. Okay, there will be a build up to it, so people start losing the plot as the the transit gets nearer and nearer to being exact, but when it goes exact, it's like boof. That's it. You as the individual can't resist the happenings of whatever it is. You've just got to sort of relax into it and hope that things improve. We'll see. So the areas of life for the UK chart that have got the outer planetary ones is the 4th. So that's the home, the roots, like what do we consider our homes as being? So these are the buildings that we live in, the families that are closest to us. Yes, the 2 outer planets, Saturn and Neptune, it can be conjunct in the natal Uranus-y thing. And then the transiting Uranus is going to go away from Venus, and it's going to eventually work its way into the 7th. But once it's finished with Venus, which it will do at some point when it goes into Gemini next year, it's going to form that sextile. So we'll see. And then the transiting Pluto, because the UK chart has nothing in the sign of Aquarius, it's the 3rd house that's predominantly in Aquarius, and obviously the 3rd house is ruled by Uranus, and Uranus is located in the 4th. And if you want to use an old ruler, you can say Saturn is in the 1st, because that's an old ruler. But transiting Pluto, 3rd house. It's still in the 2nd as the year starts. It'll take a while to get into the 3rd. I don't know even if it does next year, but that's about finances. Now, I absolutely want to get onto the podcast someone who understands finances, so I do have somebody in mind going to talk to us about what's going to go on financially, because apparently things are going to change so much it will be unrecognisable. But the areas of life: 4th, home, roots; 5, children, family, because Chiron's transiting through the 6th, health, NHS; 7th, well, that's going to be quite a while before anything goes through there next year. Uranus is going to take ages to get into the 7th. But Jupiter is going through the 8th, and then will eventually work its way through the 9th. 8th, investments, so the stock exchange. And then when Jupiter goes through the 9th, that's the international relations. So how are we getting on with other countries? Yeah. So today I've just been chatting a bit about the natal chart to the UK, the transits for next year. We'll see what happens. I have no idea. And if you've got any thoughts on it, send me an email, mary@maryenglish.co.uk. And as I mentioned in my last episode, I am inviting onto the podcast guests that are going to teach us, because trust me, I don't know everything. I'm going to have guests on that will teach us things. Okay, so there might be just one bit of astrology that they really love being able to teach. So I've got my first guest lining up. We haven't decided on dates yet, but that will happen. And if you want to learn astrology with me one-on-one, there's some details on my website. There's a document you can download that goes through what all the lessons involve. If you feel you've learned enough astrology already, but you haven't managed to put it into private practice, I offer coaching. So again, ping me an email, or you can book directly off the website on the app link. That'll take you to, it's called Astro Coaching. Click that and book one of those, and we can talk about, and you can have some sessions, because if you need help setting your practice up, one session ain't going to do it. You need regular ones, maybe once a month for 3 or 4 months, until you've jumped and you've started doing it. Yeah, so maybe 2026 is the year that you go professional. And you don't have to be professional full time. I know plenty of astrologers that only work what I would consider as part time. I'm not part time myself. I work every day of the week except Wednesdays, because it's my day off, and Sundays because I do the podcast. But I know numbers of people that work part time because they've got other businesses, other jobs that they do, and that's perfectly legit and cool. But if you feel that you would like someone to hold your hand while you set your practice up, then again, ping me an email. And finally, if you've got your chart and there's something in it that you don't understand you'd like me to discuss, then again, get in contact. Everything's on my website, all the things that you need to learn about me and how to book and whatever, they're on there. And the email is mary@maryish.co.uk. And I hope you have a fab new year, and I'll speak to you next week. Bye bye now.